Margaery Tyrell stood upon the balcony overlooking King's Landing, the breeze from Blackwater Bay lightly catching the tendrils of her carefully arranged hair. She observed the sprawl of clay rooftops, the labyrinth of narrow streets, and the throngs of people who meandered below, living out their lives with a near-unconscious acceptance of who held power. She wondered if they truly cared who sat upon the Iron Throne or whether they simply longed for consistent bread, work, and a respite from war. Her heart drummed steadily as she considered her next steps. It had been mere days since King Joffrey's ghastly death at the Purple Wedding, and though she wore the black of mourning in public, her mind and spirit felt anything but bereaved. Instead, her thoughts churned with new possibilities, each fueled by her family's ambition and her own quiet determination. The Lannisters believed they had her safely in hand, a well-trained mare that could be matched to any stallion for their benefit. But Margaery Tyrell was not so tame as they imagined. She had seen, through her short time in King's Landing, how precarious the Lannisters' hold truly was. Tywin Lannister, for all his cunning, was aging. Cersei, for all her ferocity, was unraveling. And Tommen, the sweet child king, was but a pawn, untested in the ways of war and politics. If any moment were ripe for the Tyrells to outmaneuver the Lannisters, this was it. Margaery's gaze swept from the rooftops toward the stark outline of the Red Keep. In that fortress of red stone, the game was far from over. Joffrey's death had ignited fresh chaos within the Lannister clan, the rumors swirling around the court like restless spirits. Cersei's grief raged into accusations, and the kingdom's new figurehead of power, Lord Tywin, was forced to expend his considerable energy to calm her while simultaneously reforging alliances. Little Myrcella remained in Dorne, betrothed to the Martells, and Jaime Lannister, once so boastful, now prowled the halls with a certain hollowed fatigue that did not escape Margaery's keen eyes. Yes, there was weakness in the House of the Lion, and it was time for the rose to sink its thorns in deeper. She drew back from the balcony's ledge and let the sunlight spill across her face. Dressed in subtle mourning clothes, deep grays with green threads that signified her Tyrell roots, she managed an air of subdued elegance that won over the hearts of the crowd during public appearances. In private, away from prying eyes, she thought only of her grandmother's counsel. The only way to truly wield power, my sweet girl, is to ensure you hold the strings of your puppet without letting them feel the pull. Lady Olenna had spoken these words to her when Margaery was a child. She repeated them again the night before leaving Highgarden, whispering them in her ear as they strolled among the moonlit roses in the gardens. It was a well-known truth that House Tyrell had long resented taking second place to the Lannisters. Highgarden stood as a beacon of fertility and bounty in the Reach, feeding the Seven Kingdoms with its farmland and produce. Yet, the Lannisters flaunted gold and cunning as though they were the only pillars that held up the realm. Even in simpler times, before Robert's Rebellion, before the War of the Five Kings, the Tyrells understood that they would never gain the crown through brute force. But cunning, marriage, alliances, and the cheerful subterfuge of wearing a pleasant smile could achieve more than might alone. Now, events had presented Margaery with an extraordinary opportunity. For so long, many had assumed her a pliant young maiden, content to stand beside a monstrous king in exchange for a sparkling crown. But she had worn that unholy betrothal like a strategic cloak. If Joffrey had not died, she would have kept playing the role, exuding sweetness that belied her deeper nature. His sudden death brought sorrow, fear, and suspicion. Yet it also unshackled her from that particular arrangement. All eyes had turned on Tyrion, on Sansa Stark, on the myriad of possible conspirators. Margaery herself wore an outward expression of shock and grief while inside. She recognized that this moment was a slip knot around the Lannisters' neck. The question was how tightly she and House Tyrell might pull. Olenna had left King's Landing soon after the wedding, feigning age and frailty, but Margaery suspected there was more to that swift departure than simply old bones weary of the capital. Indeed, the entire fiasco of Joffrey's poisoning hinged on Lady Olenna's involvement. But Margaery refused to dwell on the precise details, as the less she knew, the less likely she would betray it in the face of Cersei's thirst for blame. For now, the bigger question was how to secure the Tyrell hold on the kingdom. She swept out of her chamber, catching the eye of her lady's maid, Dara, who curtsied silently and followed. The corridors of the Red Keep were hushed, as though the castle itself mourned. Lannister guards stood posted at regular intervals, decked in crimson cloaks that made Margaery grimace inwardly. There were Tyrell retainers too, but fewer, as courtesy demanded the Lannisters remain the visible face of power in the capital. Margaery recognized the precariousness of that arrangement. The sooner she and her family could bolster their presence, the better. In the solar where her grandmother once sat spinning plots, Margaery found two individuals who had proven themselves essential to her purpose. One was her brother, Loras Tyrell, the famed Knight of the Flowers, looking ever so graceful even in the muted attire that custom demanded. The other was a tall, slender woman named Eleanor, a distant cousin of the Tyrell main line who had displayed unwavering loyalty and the keen intelligence that Margaery valued so highly in her inner circle. They stood by the window, heads bent, speaking in hushed tones. At Margaery's entrance, they straightened and dipped their heads in respect. She dismissed Dara, who quickly departed to stand by the door. Once the maid was out of immediate earshot, Margaery approached her brother and cousin, a small, conspiratorial smile curling her lips. "We must speak quickly," she said, her voice warm and vibrant yet charged with resolve. "The Lannisters have ears everywhere, but we cannot afford to remain silent. Not now." Loras inclined his head. "Sister, word around the court is that Cersei grows more restless by the day. She hounds the guards for any trace of Sansa Stark or Tyrion. She claims each day to have found new evidence of their guilt. The trial will be soon, and it will be for show only. Father is focusing on appeasing Tywin. We must think beyond the immediate spectacle." Eleanor nodded. "Lord Tywin grows cautious. A Mace Tyrell who becomes too brash might provoke the Lannisters into turning on us outright. But if we act too meek, we forfeit opportunities that may never come again. We need to strike a balance. Lord Mace will heed Lady Olenna's letters, but we need more than the head of the house. We need you, Margaery, to keep the Lannisters comfortable enough to let us operate in the shadows." Margaery considered the pair, her keen hazel eyes gleaming. "Comfortable, yes, but never too comfortable. We want them to remain suspecting shadows behind every tapestry. Let the Lannisters chase ghosts. It will keep them from noticing the real moves until it's too late." She paused, exhaled softly, and let her shoulders relax. Even in her own quarters, she was aware of the need for appearances. An anxious or frantic expression might spark suspicion in the many spies who roamed the Red Keep. "Have we word from grandmother?" she asked softly. Eleanor stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Yes, she has returned to Highgarden and has begun receiving correspondences from Dorne, from the Riverlands, and even from some of the free cities. One of them, Bravos, may be willing to consider certain trade allowances if they see a shift in the monarchy. But it's dangerous to rely on foreign bankers or merchants too soon." Loras's hand curled around the pommel of his sword. "We need allies here in Westeros first. We need to sever or undermine the Lannisters' alliances. The Boltons in the north, the Freys in the Riverlands, these are tenuous connections. The north is restless over the death of Robb Stark, and the Freys are widely hated for their betrayal. There is fertile ground to turn the tide of public opinion. If we undermine the Lannister supply lines or guarantee better trade routes to those lords who might bend the knee to a new power, we can choke them out." Margaery's mind churned with possibilities. She pictured the vast reach of the Tyrell bannermen, the gold of Highgarden, and the seeds of discontent that lingered among many houses. "It must be done carefully," she reiterated. "The Lannisters will crush open defiance the moment they see it. For now, let them focus on Tyrion's trial, on the shock of Joffrey's death, on Sansa's disappearance. While their eyes are on that drama, we'll begin planting seeds. With luck, those seeds will take root quickly." She breathed in, let the tension gather in her chest, then exhaled, recalling the hush of Highgarden's gardens and the night blossoms that thrived under careful cultivation. Politics, she had realized long ago, was not unlike gardening. One must till the earth, sow seeds in the right season, provide water and care, but never too much. Too much light, and the tender sprouts would burn. Too many missteps, and the fledgling alliance would wilt under the scorching sun of the Lannister gaze. Her eyes flickered to her brother. Loras, has father spoken of forging new alliances through marriage? I know we spoke in passing about strengthening ties, but father may have been too enthralled with seeing me wed to a king. He has not given me new instructions, Loras replied with a trace of bitterness. With Joffrey dead, I suspect the realm will soon see me betrothed to another they deem advantageous. Or at least father will suggest it. But that is not the immediate problem. We need to secure our existing alliances first. Margaery almost laughed at the irony. She had been thrown to Renly Baratheon, then Joffrey, and now they spoke of her brother's next forced match. Marriages for the highborn were never about love, only advantage, only stepping stones toward power. We'll handle that. For now, each of you keep your eyes and ears open. Speak softly to those who hint at frustration with the Lannisters. Remind them that House Tyrell feeds the realm, that we're the reason King's Landing hasn't starved these past years. Offer subtle promises, that as the Tyrell rose blooms, those who stand with us may find a share of the sun. No rash words, no open declarations. Plant seeds. Eleanor and Loras both agreed. With that, Margaery stepped away, letting her hand linger on the carved frame of the window. The red keep stone was warm under her fingertips, though a deeper chill seemed to lurk inside its walls. She turned her thoughts inward for a moment, recalling how Joffrey had laughed at the small folk, how he had threatened and tormented with sadistic glee. She reminded herself how precarious power truly was. A single sip of wine, a single stone cast in the right place, and a king was felled. In the Game of Thrones, life was fragile. And so, to secure her place, she needed to act without mercy when the time came. In the days that followed, Margaery played her part to perfection. She appeared at court in her muted mourning garments, slender and elegant, offering a kind word to the grieving Tommen, whose innocent blue eyes blinked at her with both fear and admiration. She visited the kitchens, instructing the royal cooks to ensure the new king's favorite pastries were available. She appeared at the September of Baelor, kneeling in prayer while the faith looked on approvingly. Her gestures were small, gentle, but each was calculated. The common folk, suffering in the aftermath of wars, still remembered Margaery delivering bread to orphans and tending to the poor under the scorching sun. They whispered that she was kind, that she should have been the queen. Meanwhile, Margaery's smaller circle worked behind the scenes. Loras continued to frequent the training yard, forging quiet bonds with knights disillusioned by Cersei's rages. Eleanor attended feasts and suppers, listening to the talk of lesser lords and traveling merchants who had come to the capital to see the trials. Their findings trickled back to Margaery, forming a tapestry of frustration and ambition among the various houses. Many feared the Lannisters, but a handful secretly yearned for a change. If the realm sensed that the Tyrells could be a stable alternative, the wind might blow in their favor. One late afternoon, Margaery stepped into her bedchamber to find a fresh letter waiting on her desk. She glanced at Dara, who stood quietly with hands folded. "Who delivered this?" "A messenger in Tyrell livery, my lady," Dara murmured, dipping her head. "He said it was most urgent." Margaery dismissed the girl with a gentle wave, then broke the wax seal. She recognized her grandmother's handwriting immediately. Lady Olenna wrote in a cramped but elegant script, and the words burned with the clarity of a well-honed mind. "My sweetest girl, do not place all your trust in those who are near us now. Even your father is easily swayed by the prospect of open alliance with the Lannisters, despite our best intentions. You must wear your sweet smile and continue to gather your own resources in secret. A bud that blooms too quickly will attract too much attention. Let the lion come to you. Appear helpless where you must, yet remain vigilant. I have planted seeds of my own here in Highgarden and beyond. When you see the first real cracks, you will know. Watch, wait, then strike. With love, Olenna." Margaery reread the letter twice, the gears of her mind shifting and settling. Her grandmother was right. The time was not yet ripe for open confrontation. House Tyrell was strong, but the Lannisters still had the crown, the gold of Casterly Rock, and the memory of Tywin Lannister's numerous victories. For all that her father, Mace Tyrell, projected confidence, Margaery knew they could not risk an outright rebellion. There had to be a slow tightening, like a vine creeping across a courtyard, unseen until it strangled the pillars. She tucked the letter into her bosom and went to her mirror, checking her reflection. She had grown adept at containing her excitement behind a mask of composed benevolence. This day, though, she allowed herself a thin, private smile. There was danger here, yes, but also the taste of triumph. If things proceeded well, she might soon shape the fate of the realm in a more direct manner than any Tyrell before her. The Lannisters believed they were the apex predators in the capital. Yet she was not some timid creature waiting to be devoured. She was a hunter too, hidden behind a gentle exterior, stepping carefully until the moment came to bare her claws. That evening, she attended a formal dinner in the Great Hall, where the lords and ladies gathered beneath the flickering torchlight as Tywin and Cersei made a show of Tommen's acceptance as the new king. As Margaery stepped inside, the clamor of conversation hushed slightly, and eyes turned toward her. She knew some sympathized with her, the bride whose royal husband died so suddenly at their wedding feast. Others might suspect she had a hand in it, but suspicion was not proof, and for now, she held the advantage of seeming too pious, too gentle, too fair for such dark deeds. She curtsied graciously to Tommen, who was seated at the front with his mother and grandfather, then took her seat at a lesser table with her brother, father, and a handful of lesser lords. Throughout the dinner, her eyes flickered across the hall. Grand Maester Pycelle dozed off in his seat. Cersei stared straight ahead, her features tight and hollowed with anger. Jaime had the seat of honor near Tommen but said little, only occasionally sharing a word with his sister. Tyrion, of course, was absent, locked away to await trial. Margaery noted the tension in the air. Rumors of the trial had grown more lurid. Some said the imp had used black magic, others that he used a stolen poison from beyond the narrow sea. Few seemed to consider the possibility that the real orchestrators might be seated right here, laughing behind their goblets of wine. As she sipped from her cup, Margaery turned her attention to her father. Mace Tyrell wore a jovial smile, plump cheeks red from indulgence, yet his eyes flitted toward Tywin, hoping perhaps for a gesture of approval. Margaery inwardly sighed. Her father craved respect in a way that compromised his better judgment. He was decent-hearted, to be sure, but not nearly cunning enough for the game that lay ahead. Across the table, Loras caught her gaze for a fleeting moment, then offered an almost imperceptible nod. He too sensed the swirling currents. When the dinner concluded, Margaery rose and stepped away from her family, making a polite circle around the hall, greeting a few of the lesser lords and ladies, complimenting them on their finery, inquiring about their health. She listened more than she spoke, gleaning scraps of rumor regarding the Vale, where Littlefinger had married Lysa Arryn. She heard about skirmishes in the Riverlands, about raiders from the Mountains of the Moon. Each piece of information could be useful in its own subtle way. But eventually, she found herself standing face to face with the king's mother herself. Cersei Lannister regarded her with open distaste, though she masked it behind a taut, formal smile. "My lady," she said in a voice as cold as the wind off the wall, "I trust you are finding ways to occupy your time in our dear King's Landing." Margaery curtsied, offering a demure bow of her head. "I pray for King Tommen's good health each morning, my queen." She paused for half a heartbeat. "Forgive me, I misspoke. You are the Queen Regent now." Cersei's green eyes glinted with something akin to triumph. "Yes," she replied. "The realm requires a strong hand in this time of grief. My father and I see to Tommen's needs." "Of course you do, and I am sure the Seven smile upon you for your devotion." Cersei inclined her head, her smile not reaching her eyes. "You are kind, Lady Margaery. It must be difficult for you, losing a husband so soon after marriage. Yet I see you find the strength to attend dinners and greet lords as though it were a normal day." Inside, Margaery felt the barb. Cersei wanted her to appear too eager, too unfeeling for Joffrey's demise. She was carefully looking for cracks in Margaery's demeanor, something she could exploit. Margaery allowed a tremor of her lower lip, her eyes glistening just enough to mimic controlled sorrow. "I hide my grief behind courtesy," she said softly. "The court expects no less, but my heart remains heavy. I continue to light candles in the sept for Joffrey's soul." Cersei's gaze seemed to search Margaery's face for any hint of duplicity. Margaery offered nothing more than the veneer of a gentle, dutiful widow. Finally, with a small nod, Cersei excused herself, gliding away with the purposeful stride of a lioness that believed she still ruled the pride. Margaery held her composure until the Queen Regent was out of sight. Only then did she allow the faintest exhalation, a subtle shift of relief. She knew it was but a small skirmish in a much larger war. In time, Cersei might lash out in more direct ways, particularly if she uncovered any whiff of Tyrell treachery. But Margaery intended to keep that possibility as slim as possible. Over the next week, the trial of Tyrion Lannister unfolded, and King's Landing was consumed by the spectacle. Margaery sat in the gallery, outwardly poised, inwardly counting the number of times the Lannisters contradicted themselves. So frantic was their thirst for scapegoating. When testimony came from Ser Marentrant, from Pycelle, from Varys, each one seemed more theatrically damning than the last. She noted Tyrion's rage, the cunning look on Shay's face when she delivered her betrayal, and the rapt attention of the crowd. This was a show, a masterful drama staged by Tywin to maintain Lannister power and to punish a son he never truly wanted. Perhaps Tywin believed that removing Tyrion would reassert the Lannisters' image of ruthlessness and control. Margaery watched all this unfold, noticing how Tommen had been kept away, how many of the small folk seemed less than convinced by the trial's pageantry. In hushed conversations after each day's session, lords and ladies whispered their doubts. Some believed Tyrion guilty, but others questioned why Cersei was so quick to blame him. The seeds of uncertainty were being sown, and House Tyrell did nothing to stop them. The more the Lannisters battered their own reputation with a sham trial, the more the realm would grow hungry for an alternative. Then came Tyrion's stunning demand for a trial by combat, which forced the entire city's rumor mills into overdrive. Margaery recalled the frantic talk in the corridors, how men spoke in hushed amazement at Tyrion's boldness, how Cersei's face contorted with anger that she could not simply have him executed on the spot. Over and over, Margaery reminded herself not to appear too invested in the Lannister drama. She gave polite answers when questioned, but otherwise, she let the trial run its course. The day of the combat dawned hot and heavy with tension. Margaery watched from a vantage point in the crowd as the Red Viper of Dorne, Prince Oberyn Martell, faced off against the monstrous Ser Gregor Clegane. The clash was fierce, the slender, agile Dornish prince dancing around the towering knight. Hope sparked in Margaery's chest that Oberyn might triumph, not for Tyrion's sake alone, but for the blow it would deal to the Lannisters' pride. In the stands, she noticed Cersei's hands clenched into white-knuckled fists, but fate had other ideas. The mountain caught Oberyn in a moment of hubris, and with sickening finality, crushed his head. The stadium rang with the horrified screams of onlookers. Margaery's stomach clenched in revulsion as she watched the gore, but she forced herself to remain calm. Around her, people recoiled, women fainted, men turned pale. She heard the booming voice of Tywin Lannister pronouncing Tyrion's guilt. Thus ended the trial, and Tyrion was sentenced to death. Margaery saw Cersei's triumphant smirk. She also saw the devastation on Prince Doran Martell's envoy, the betrayal they must have felt at losing Oberyn. More seeds of discontent. The Martells would not forgive nor forget. Already, Margaery wondered if Dorne might be ready to support a new claim in the future, if properly courted. At that moment, though, all attention was upon the broken body of Oberyn Martell and the battered form of Ser Gregor. Though the next events happened swiftly, Margaery had prepared as best she could. Tyrion vanished from his cell, spirited away by unknown conspirators. Rumor pinned it on Jaime, on Varys, on possible Sellswords. The city was in uproar. Then, the truly shocking news. Tyrion Lannister had allegedly murdered his father in the privy with a crossbow. Tywin Lannister dead, slain by his own son on the same night that Tyrion escaped. With that single blow, Margaery saw the realm shake. Tywin was the spine of the Lannister family, their strategist, their face of unquestionable power. Without him, the Lannisters' hold on the throne became immeasurably weaker. Cersei was cunning, but her anger overshadowed her reason. Jaime had lost his sword hand and much of his former prowess, and his loyalties were ambiguous. Tommen was just a boy. The Lannisters still had gold, they still had soldiers, but their leadership was reeling. In the chaos that followed Tywin's death, Margaery knew her moment was nearing. With Olenna's counsel, House Tyrell prepared to make its cautious moves. Although Margaery maintained her image of a grieving widow, in truth, her nights were filled with covert meetings and coded letters. The shock and fear swirling around the Red Keep made it easier to move unseen, for every Lannister guard was consumed by the urgent matter of who killed Tywin and where Tyrion had gone. One such night, Margaery met with her father, Mace, in his lavish rooms provided by the crown. He was pacing back and forth, flushed with excitement, a goblet of wine in one hand. "Have you heard the news?" he asked. "The Vale is refusing to send men. The Eyrie is effectively under Baelish's control, and they are stalling. Meanwhile, the Dornish envoy has all but declared the Lannisters their enemy. Tensions run high. It is the perfect time for the Tyrells to strengthen Tommen's position, and ours." Margaery studied her father carefully. She could see the gleam in his eyes that so often accompanied ambition. "Yes, father," she said, her tone measured. "But let us not forget that the Lannisters' downfall could cause the entire realm to erupt. If we are to intervene, we must do so in a way that positions our house as the realm's savior, not its betrayer." Mace nodded vigorously, sipping his wine. "Precisely. We can offer to broker peace with Dorne. We can offer to keep the realm fed. We can help restore stability in the crown's name. Once Tommen is a bit older, I can see him marrying you, my dear, or perhaps Loras will marry Myrcella if she returns from Dorne. Many possibilities." She tilted her head, carefully considering his words. Her father, for all his flaws, knew one truth. The Tyrells stood to gain the most if they appeared to be helping the Iron Throne, while simultaneously ensuring the Lannisters no longer had exclusive power. But Margaery was not content with simply melding with the existing monarchy. She wished for a more profound shift. Still, it was a delicate line to walk. "We should certainly appease the Lannisters for now," she said, "but begin forging deeper ties with the great houses. We cannot let the Lannisters claim all the glory if we stabilize the Seven Kingdoms. We must be seen as equal partners at least, if not more." Her father agreed eagerly, and they spent the better part of an hour discussing trade routes, alliances, and how best to maneuver among the chaos. By the time Margaery left, she was certain her father's mind would remain on forging formal alliances. She was equally certain that Olenna's approach, more cunning and far-reaching, would prove the sharper tool in the end. The next day, King's Landing stirred with rumors of Tywin Lannister's funeral arrangements. Some suggested the body would be taken back to the Rock. Others that it would lie in state in the Great September, though the smell was reportedly overwhelming. Margaery, for her part, feigned sympathy and approached Cersei in the corridors, offering to help with funeral garments or the arrangements of the September. Cersei refused her coldly, but Margaery caught the flicker of uncertainty in the older woman's eyes. She recognized that with Tywin gone, Cersei no longer had her father's shadow to shield her. She was truly alone in the world, surrounded by sycophants and whisperers, but lacking the unwavering support of a cunning patriarch. Let the cracks deepen, Margaery thought. Let the Lannisters splinter from within. The smell of ambition was heavy in King's Landing. Varys was nowhere to be found, but other whispers indicated that the Master of Whisperers had flown the nest. Meanwhile, the Master of Coin, Peter Baelish, was busy in the Vale. The city's power structure was unraveling rapidly. Even the Faith seemed restless, with the High Septon complaining about the Crown's generosity toward them diminishing. In this swirl of chaos, Margaery quietly reached out to certain individuals. lesser lords from the Stormlands who had not forgotten that the Tyrells once supported Renly's claim, knights in the Crownlands who resented being overshadowed by the Lannisters, and merchants in King's Landing who relied on the Reach's bounty. None of these moves were overt, but each served to create a subtle network of alliances that would be ready when the moment came. Weeks passed. The funeral for Tywin was held amid great pomp and ceremony, though the stench from his corpse had grown so foul that even the silent sisters struggled to maintain composure. Margaery attended in a modest black gown, offering a serene expression of respect. She watched as Cersei stood by the bier, face pale, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Tommen fidgeted nervously by his mother's side. Jaime's face remained impassive, though a muscle in his jaw twitched whenever he glanced at his father's cold features. After the ceremony, Margaery lingered with the rest of the courtiers as they processed out of the Great September. She wove through the crowd, exchanging polite greetings, capturing snippets of conversation. The Tarleys of Horn Hill, loyal bannermen of House Tyrell, had come to pay their respects. Sam Tarley's father, the stern Randall Tarley, offered her a curt bow but seemed unimpressed by the funeral's theatrics. She made a mental note to speak with him later, for while Randall Tarley was a proud man, he was also a renowned battlefield commander, and if House Tyrell's power were to rise, having him firmly on their side would be invaluable. The days turned to weeks, and with Tywin's passing, it was as though a great tension had snapped. Cersei and Jaime tried to keep the realm together, but their efforts were overshadowed by the growing dissent in Dorne, the unrest in the north, and the cunning of Littlefinger in the Vale. King Tommen, too young to truly understand the gravity, was more interested in his kittens and whispered questions about his beloved Margaery. Indeed, the court began to whisper that Margaery might soon be betrothed again, this time to Tommen. The Tyrells would secure the queenly role they had sought all along. Margaery did not dismiss these rumors. If marrying Tommen gave her the power to effect real change, so be it. A wedding might secure the Tyrell presence as the de facto rulers behind a young and impressionable king. But as Margaery considered her grandmother's words, "Watch, wait, then strike," she wondered if simply wedding Tommen was enough. Perhaps there was a bolder path. One night, she convened a secret meeting in her chambers with Eleanor, Loras, and a trusted handful of knights sworn to Highgarden. The hour was late, the candles burned low. She placed a thick tapestry at the door's base to muffle voices. Then she spoke. "We all know the Lannisters cling to power by a thread. Tywin is gone, Tyrion is vanished, and Cersei's fury at any slight has put the entire realm on edge. Tommen is a boy, and though he may bear the crown, we know who will truly guide him." Loras leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Yes, but father seems content with the arrangement. He sees it as our best chance for a permanent seat of power. You as Tommen's queen, father as the hand, and so forth. Are we not risking everything if we push further?" Eleanor's eyes flicked to Margaery. "We could ensure a gentler future for the realm if you become Tommen's wife. The Tyrells would effectively control the throne. But do you have something else in mind?" Margaery allowed her gaze to travel around the room, measuring their willingness to hear her out. "House Tyrell has always been overshadowed by House Lannister. Even if we guide Tommen, the name Lannister will remain on the throne, and we will forever be the power behind the throne. That is no small thing, but it's not the same as truly ruling in our own name." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I do not suggest open rebellion, but imagine if Tommen, kind though he is, were to meet an unfortunate fate. The realm would be thrown into disorder, and the Tyrells, as the house that feeds them, the house that has proven benevolent in the past, might step forward with a more direct claim. Perhaps through a council of lords, perhaps through the voice of the small folk who have grown to love our generosity. We could champion stability against the Lannisters' chaos." The knights exchanged uneasy glances. One Ser Daemon cleared his throat. "You speak of regicide, my lady. That is not a trifling matter. Tommen is but a boy." Margaery met his gaze. "I know the gravity of what I say, but how many innocent boys and girls have perished in these wars? How many have died because of the Lannisters' cruelty or the Starks' cause or the Baratheon rebellion? Tommen might be innocent personally, but he is a Lannister king. As long as he sits on that throne, Cersei's claws will not be far, and House Lannister will never relinquish power easily. If we want a realm shaped by the Tyrell ideals, peace, prosperity, unity, then we must be prepared to do what is necessary. Silence hung in the air. Loras gripped the edge of his seat, tension evident in his posture. Finally, he spoke. "Sister, you are prepared to see a child killed for our ambition?" Margaery swallowed, her eyes flickering with a resolute sadness. "I do not relish it, but if the realm is to be free of Lannister claws, their line must be ended. Myrcella is in Dorne, presumably under watchful eyes who hate the Lannisters. That leaves only Tommen. If he lives to adulthood, Cersei will manipulate him, or he will adopt Lannister methods. The wars may begin anew, with the Tyrells still second to a golden lion. I will do everything possible to see the realm at peace. If removing Tommen is the final step, so be it." Eleanor's face was ashen. She pressed her lips together. "We will need the support of more than a handful of knights. If we do this, we must ensure the great houses do not turn against us as kingslayers. Even now, the memory of the Mad King's death and the stigma around oath-breaking is strong." Margaery nodded. "Which is why we must tread carefully. We do not proclaim ourselves kingslayers. Tommen would die in a manner that appears natural or at least unrelated to us. He is young. Sickness could strike. Accidents happen. And if it happens after tensions with Dorne escalate, might not the blame fall on the Dornish, who have already lost Oberyn? Or on the faith which has grown disillusioned with the crown? Possibilities abound." Ser Daemon shifted uncomfortably. "But will the realm accept a Tyrell monarchy, or even a Tyrell regency? By all the laws of inheritance, the throne should pass to Myrcella, or failing that, to distant Baratheon relatives, or Targaryens across the sea if they still live. This is not a simple matter of stepping in after Tommen's death." "I know," Margaery said, keeping her tone gentle but firm. "We must ensure the realm sees us as the only viable option. Let them see the Lannisters as cursed, the Baratheons as spent, and the Targaryens as myth. Let them see that the Tyrells fed them, protected them, and kept the peace. By the time tragedy befalls Tommen, we will have orchestrated alliances that make it clear that any other claimant would face open rebellion. The lords in the Riverlands, in the Stormlands, in the Reach would unite behind us, for we are the wealthiest, the most stable, and the most beloved by the small folk. It will be done so carefully that no one can point to us directly. Then, in the chaos, we step forward as the saviors." Her words hung in the candlelit air. One by one, the knights and her allies exchanged grave glances. They were Tyrell bannermen, sworn to support the house. Yet regicide was a monstrous proposition. Loras was the first to break the silence. "If this is the path we choose, sister, let us do it without cruelty. Tommen is kind. I've seen his gentleness with the animals, his polite manners. He is nothing like Joffrey. Can we not wait and see if he might be molded into a just king under our guidance?" Margaery's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Even a just king under Cersei's shadow is dangerous. If we do not act, we will forever live in fear that the Lannisters may regain their footing and discard us. I will not see our family's future tied to the whims of a single boy and his mother's madness." Loras closed his eyes. He seemed to wrestle with his conscience, then nodded slowly. "Very well, but promise me, Margaery, that we will only do this if there is no other way." She placed a hand over his, feeling the trembling tension in his muscles. "I promise, dear brother. We do not take a life unless the alternative is worse for the realm." Eleanor, Ser Daemon, and the others voiced their agreement, though none looked entirely at ease. Margaery dismissed them, instructing them to return discreetly to their quarters. As the chamber emptied, she found herself alone, staring at the flickering candlelight that danced across the tapestry on the walls. It depicted a field of golden roses. She ran her fingers over the embroidered petals, her thoughts churning. She knew what she contemplated was dangerous, treasonous, sinful even. But in the world of kings and queens, the lines between sin and necessity were blurred. She recalled Joffrey's cruelty, the devastation wrought upon the Starks, the war-torn fields of the Reach when the Lannisters tried to cripple their harvest. Her face grew taut with resolve. If a single boy's death could spare the realm another war, could usher in an era of stable rule under House Tyrell, was that not worth it? Was it not a small price compared to the rivers of blood already spilled in the War of the Five Kings? She had been taught from childhood that the needs of the many outweighed the needs of the few. And so, she told herself, she would not let pity or sentimentality steer her from a course that might secure lasting peace and power for her family. As the moon rose higher over King's Landing, Margaery put out the candles and retired to bed. Sleep did not come easily. The memory of Tommen's innocent smile haunted her, and she tossed and turned, wondering if Loras was right, if there was a chance to guide Tommen toward a fair and prosperous reign. But with Cersei still breathing, that seemed unlikely. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her, and her dreams were filled with images of roses choking out a field of golden lions. The next morning, the capital awakened to more rumors. Cersei was maneuvering to appoint new members of the small council who would be loyal to her above all else. Kevan Lannister had distanced himself from the city, preferring to remain at Casterly Rock, evidently distraught by Tywin's death. The Martells scowled at every mention of the royal family, while the Tyrell presence quietly grew. Margaery increased her public appearances, offering alms, supporting the faith, reminding the people that the Tyrells were there, not to subjugate, but to help. She observed as Tommen grew more attached to her. The child found comfort in her gentle words and warm smiles. She often brought him small gifts, a gilded cat collar, a painted wooden knight. He would laugh, delighted, the deep sorrow of losing his brother momentarily forgotten. Margaery always responded with affectionate indulgence, praising him for his budding sense of justice whenever he expressed empathy. Cersei looked on with narrowed eyes, but so far, she did not dare forbid these interactions. Even Cersei knew that Margaery's presence stabilized Tommen, and a stable king was what the realm needed to avoid more civil unrest. Yet behind every sweet moment, Margaery felt the knot in her chest tighten. If she had to be the hand that snuffed out Tommen's life, could she truly do it? Or would she delegate such a deed to a silent subordinate, done under cover of darkness, so she need never see the boy's terrified face? Still, she told herself, if you wear the crown, you must bear the cost. Her grandmother's words from years ago echoed in her mind. Power is not won with kindness alone. In the weeks that followed, Margaery carefully tested the waters with various nobles to gauge their openness to a Tyrell-led regime should Tommen fall. She posed hypothetical questions about stability, about the lineage of the Baratheons, about the possibility of Myrcella returning from Dorne. Answers varied. Some believed in the strict line of succession, while others admitted that the realm could use a new start, especially if it meant avoiding another protracted war. Margaery gleaned that, with the right timing, a large portion of the nobility would side with the Tyrells, if only to avoid chaos. She did not push them further. She let them imagine the scenario themselves, sowing seeds of acceptance. Meanwhile, Loras doubled his efforts among the knights, forging quiet bonds. The Tyrell Gold discreetly lubricated friendships with captains of the Gold Cloaks. The City Watch was crucial to controlling King's Landing, and if a day came when conflict flared, Margaery wanted at least a portion of them on the Tyrell side. Eleanor pursued alliances among the ladies of the court, who often had the ears of their husbands at home. She hosted tea gatherings where the talk seemed idle, but each word was carefully chosen to coax out dissatisfaction with the Lannisters and support for the Tyrell cause. By the time a full moon shone once more over King's Landing, Margaery had gathered a subtle web of support that spanned from the Red Keep to the harbor. But a new challenge arose. Kevan Lannister returned to the city, summoned by Cersei, who recognized her own precarious state. Kevan was not as brilliantly ruthless as Tywin, but he was steady, and many Lannister bannermen respected him. His arrival brought a layer of renewed caution. If Kevan succeeded in rallying the Lannister loyalists and reestablishing some sense of order, it could delay or even thwart the Tyrell plan. Margaery attended a small council session as an observer, sitting quietly while Kevin took his seat beside Cersei. Jaime lingered in the background, silent. She watched as Kevin listened to the fractious reports of banditry in the Riverlands, Dorne's hostility, and the cracks in the Crown's finances. Then Kevin, in calm, measured tones, proposed strategies to restore the rule of law, to mend ties with certain houses. Margaery's spine tingled with anxiety. This was a man who might succeed in strengthening the Lannisters enough to ride out the storm. Cersei, however, bristled at her uncle's insistence that she let Tommen rule more independently, and that certain financial powers be delegated to the Master of Coin. She wanted absolute control, and Kevin seemed frustrated by her refusal to cooperate. Margaery's tension eased. Perhaps Cersei would undo the Lannisters from within by refusing to share power. If Kevin grew disgusted enough, he might leave again or remain half-hearted in his efforts. In the following days, Margaery watched the conflict between Cersei and Kevin intensify. Kevin demanded that Cersei step back as regent and let Tommen's advisors guide him. Cersei insisted that she alone knew what was best for the Boy King. Tommen was left confused and anxious, caught between them. Margaery seized every opportunity to provide him with a sense of calm, reinforcing her role as a gentle, supportive presence. Then one afternoon, while Margaery walked with Tommen in the gardens, Cersei appeared unexpectedly. She dismissed the King's Guard who accompanied them, sending them out of earshot. Margaery, mindful of her own safety, kept her posture alert but polite. Tommen blinked up at his mother, sensing tension. Cersei's voice was tight. "Tommen, go feed the birds for a moment. I must speak with Lady Margaery alone." Tommen hesitated, glancing between the two women. Margaery offered a reassuring nod and said, "Go on, Your Grace. The sparrows are waiting." She watched him trot off, seeds in hand, then turned her attention to Cersei. The Queen Regent's eyes burned. "I see how you ingratiate yourself with my son. You would worm your way into his heart, shaping his every thought until he is no longer mine. Do not mistake me, Margaery. I know exactly what you're doing." Margaery met her gaze evenly, summoning her well-practiced calm. "I am doing only what any subject would do. Supporting the king, offering kindness. Tommen has suffered so many losses. He needs stability." Cersei stepped closer, venom in her voice. "He needs a mother who loves him, not a scheming harpy from the Reach. You think I don't see it? You plan to become his queen, take my place, and rule in all but name. My father is gone, but I will not let the Tyrells hijack the throne. I will burn this city to the ground before I let that happen." Margaery felt her pulse quicken. She had known Cersei was suspicious, but to hear such open hostility was startling. Still, she forced a serene smile. "I want only peace for the realm. If Tommen wishes me by his side, I will gladly serve. But I bear no ill will toward you, my queen." Cersei laughed coldly. "A pretty lie. You Tyrells come offering food and flowers, but your ambition reeks worse than the sewers. Mark my words. If you push me, if you threaten my son, I will destroy you." Margaery took a breath, choosing her reply carefully. "I understand your devotion to Tommen, and I would never wish him harm. He is a gentle soul, undeserving of the horrors of the past. But many in this realm believe he will fare better with me as a guiding presence, ensuring the Tyrells continue to provide for the city. Surely you can see the benefit of that." Cersei's upper lip curled. For a moment, it looked like she might strike Margaery or lash out physically. But instead, she stepped back, her gaze flicking to Tommen, who was scattering seeds for the birds. "Stay away from him," she hissed, "or you will regret it." With that, she spun and walked off, her gown trailing behind her like the shadow of a lion. When Tommen returned, confused and anxious, Margaery placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, guiding him back toward the palace. Her heart thumped in her chest. Cersei's threat was no idle boast. If the Queen Regent felt cornered, she would go to any lengths to protect her claim. That included striking preemptively at the Tyrells. The time for caution was ending. If Margaery delayed too long, Cersei might attempt to remove her, or incite a conflict that put House Tyrell at a disadvantage. That evening, Margaery wrote a coded letter to Olenna, informing her that tensions had reached a boiling point and that open moves might soon be necessary. She also summoned Loras and Eleanor again, instructing them to accelerate their efforts in securing support among the nobility and the city watch. If a confrontation loomed, they needed to be certain that House Tyrell would not be outmaneuvered. Margaery could feel the pulse of the capital quicken. Spies clashed in alleyways, rumors multiplied, and everyone awaited the announcement of a royal betrothal. Yet none came. The Lannisters hesitated to formalize Tommen's marriage to Margaery, possibly due to Cersei's objections, or perhaps because Kevin was evaluating the political cost. All the while, Margaery's plan to sabotage the Lannisters from within continued apace. She could sense a storm coming. It wasn't just the tension in the air or the increasingly brazen rumors that the Tyrells would soon supplant the Lannisters. It was the faint tremor in the city's heartbeat, the knowledge that something had to break, that the realm couldn't continue to teeter on the brink forever. When the storm finally broke, Margaery intended to be ready to overturn the Lannisters' power, to seize control for her family, and to see a new rose bloom upon the Iron Throne. Night after night, she found herself staring out the window, watching the faint glow of lanterns in the streets below, hearing the distant sounds of revelry and unrest. She imagined a city that was truly safe and prosperous under the Tyrell banner. She pictured an end to the cruelty and terror that Joffrey had inflicted, that Cersei perpetuated through her paranoia. But to reach that vision, Margaery would have to walk a path strewn with thorns, possibly drenched in blood. She prayed to the Seven for guidance and strength, but she knew, deep in her heart, that the gods seldom intervened in the struggles of mortals. This was her burden, her choice, and her destiny. And so, Margaery Tyrell stood ready to conspire, to manipulate, and to strike, should the moment arise. For the sake of her family, for the future of the realm, and for the ambition that burned quietly behind her soft smiles. In the gardens of the Red Keep, roses began to bloom, their petals radiant in the summer sun, beauty laced with hidden thorns. And somewhere in the shadows, the caged lioness watched, as the rose prepared to entwine itself around the throne. Only time would tell which predator would emerge victorious when the final blow was struck.